Today's episode is going to be a little bit different and unexpectedly going to be talking about grief and loss and all the things that generally surround that topic. The reason being is because last week I received the news that my father had passed away, that my father had died. And this isn't going to be an episode, let's say, about uncomplicated grief. Why am I making this episode? Probably should be grieving. Probably should have taken the week off and not done anything. And if I'm honest, I nearly did. I'm recording this the day before. And truth be told, I don't know what will happen, whether I'll get through to the end of the episode and decide not to post it or what this is, if I'm completely honest. But I can tell you that I'm not recording this episode because I'm looking for sympathy. At times when somebody has a complicated relationship with the person that's passed away, there's this temptation, there's this draw, there's this alluring path towards rewriting the narrative, creating a narrative that can never be refuted because the person's no longer here. Something that you would prefer to be true instead, so that you can grieve conventionally, which in some ways, even though grief is impossible, feels slightly easier without really knowing what's coming. So I'm not rewriting history here either. But I do want to speak honestly about what grief looks like when love and harm coexist within that relationship that you've lost. When an abusive parent dies, you don't just grieve the person, you grieve what never was, which is wild and difficult to get your head around, I'm sure. Certainly is for me. But you see, generally I think when a father dies, that's supposed to equal sadness, reverence, forgiveness, whatever. But you see, abuse disrupts that narrative to a degree. There feels like there's this pressure to be sad enough, to speak kindly enough, or to stay silent if my truth makes other people feel uncomfortable. And I understand that. And in some ways, I'm willing to oblige. I'm quite a private person, albeit I have a podcast where I talk about my life. It's quite a contradiction there. But for me, I think the key point here is that grief isn't about who they were. It's about what they represented in my life. Obviously, I'm an emotions person. I'm a coach that works a lot with people's emotions. I believe wholeheartedly that if you can name emotions, that emotions are messages and they give you the information about how you feel. Now, that's not to say that how you feel is either right or wrong. As I've said many times, it's a bit like a calculator. If you put in the wrong numbers, you get the wrong answers. But generally, it starts to give you an idea about where you are within a situation. It nudges you and encourages you to look at what is true about a situation. But one of the things that people find almost impossible to talk about, and I understand why, because it's hard, is that you can have coexisting emotions. Sometimes those emotions can contradict each other. And that can feel very disorientating, very uncomfortable. You see, I feel sadness, but not always for him. I feel some for the child that I was, and I feel some for the father that I never had. But I feel sadness because it's apparent that before he passed away that there was a rapid decline in his mental health. And the way that he was living near the end, not to give too much away out of respect for my siblings, but was inhumane. I also feel sad for my siblings because I was on this path a very long time ago. Whether that's fortunate or not, I don't know. But what it does speak to is the value of doing the work. The death of my father was something I was nervous about because I didn't know how I would feel. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know what regrets would come up. And regret is trying to crack through, but then I use the truth to put it back in perspective. Because the truth is, no matter what I think I should have done, he wouldn't have allowed it to happen. He didn't, in fact. And I see my siblings struggle with that because they didn't get to try, for whatever their reasons were. So they don't know what I know, which is that it wouldn't have worked, most likely. He wasn't very well, I don't think. And I think having gone through all of the things at his home, that I can see that he wasn't very well at all. Other emotions I feel, and this is one that's hard to say. I'm concerned about what people might think of me if I say this, but relief. I feel relief. And then I feel the guilt for feeling relief straight afterwards. Anger keeps resurfacing and intensifying in certain ways. Anger towards his reluctance to realize that he had everything he looked for in life. Reading through letters, it's clear to me that it was a man searching for something and never feeling like he got it. But from an outside looking in perspective, mine, he was a guy born in Africa into extreme poverty that I don't think many people in England experience. And at one point, he had a good job. He had a wife, he had children, he had a secure home. And it turns out he did have some friends. And when it's all said and done, I don't know what more somebody can want, considering where they were born especially. So there's anger, frustration, all of those emotions around him not realizing that the lengths he went to communicate with family in Nigeria, but he couldn't do that for his children. So there's anger there for sure. And then there's emotional numbness. Again, I find this hard to say because it sounds very callous, but I don't really feel anything as such as that I would call conventional grief as such. I don't feel like anything towards him. And I think that's because I grieved him a long time ago. But there's this nothingness, and then I start judging myself, thinking, well, what the hell does that mean about me? That can't be right. That made me a psychopath or what? What does that mean? So there's that. And then there's these unexpected, I suppose, grief triggers, memories, smells. And then this thought that now it's truly over, that there's no what ifs and maybes and perhaps and maybe one days it's all gone, that opportunity. You see, when an abusive parent dies, there's no clean ending, only unanswered questions, which is tough. I suppose I'm using this as a time to explore what makes this loss so uniquely painful, kind of my opportunity to talk out loud, to organise my mind, to hear myself think. Again, may not even schedule this, but let's see what happens. You see, because like I said, death removes any possibility of repair. No apology, no accountability, no one day he might change. And in some ways, I suppose it's got the possibility, if I was working with a client, I would acknowledge that this has the potential to be more harmful, more hurtful than the relationship itself. Makes it difficult to mourn because you're trying to stay grounded in reality instead of that tempting and alluring path of rewriting narratives and seeing the sadness in the person he was when he died, not the person he was for his entire life. There's that possibility that you end up grieving a person that never really existed. I'm not going to grieve who he was. I suppose what I'm grieving is who he could have been. That's probably what's happening here, I would say. And one thing I don't want to do here is I don't want to rewrite any narratives because it was truly, truly horrifying when we were young. And I'm not going to offer any silver lining on my own pain or experiences or anyone else's. As I say, I'm very respectful of my siblings. They have their own path and journey. But I suppose here's what this is teaching me in real time. The healing doesn't require forgiveness. It might require some acceptance, but it doesn't have to come with that pressure of forgiveness. It can look very different because in some ways you're asking yourself to do something that's impossible. Forgiveness is very difficult even when the person you're being asked to forgive is sorry. But when they're not sorry, was never sorry, and never had the opportunity to be sorry, that's tough. That's very, very tough. I suppose I've also learned that closure isn't something that somebody else gives you. It's something you have to create for yourself, and very spookily, Having recently done the Healing the Father Wound workshop, I'm realizing the power of ritual. It's why we have funerals. It's why we have birthdays. It's why we have Christmas in some ways. It's a ritual to celebrate or to mark an occasion, a beginning, an ending, whichever. And I think that's going to be very important for me at this time, to find a way to create a ritual so I can find closure for myself and to take that on as my own responsibility. I think it's become important for me to honor my own survival of the situation rather than honoring the harm. I managed to get through what happened all the way to this point, and how I deal with this ending is important. We went to the family home and we cleared out a lot of his stuff. As I said, it was difficult for lots of ways that I don't think is worth mentioning. But one of the things I got from it is I got some family photographs that I felt had been held hostage for a long, long time. And that warms my heart. I got to read some letters and to see that actually he did keep some of the things that I sent him earlier on, which was interesting to me too. And I think what it points out to me is that there are some people that just, it doesn't matter how much we ask them, they just don't have the capacity for love. An example I use often is if I was to ask you to speak a language you couldn't speak. If I begged you, pleaded with you, told you how important it was that you spoke to me in that language right now. I requested it endlessly, and I deeply, deeply needed you to do it. It doesn't matter how much I ask, how much I want, how much I need, how much I put pressure on you. If you can't speak that language, then there's nothing you can do. You can't do it. And I think that was the position he was in when it came to love. He wasn't able to give that love. Perhaps because he never received it. I don't know. But he wasn't able to do that. I have to respect myself by having that emotional honesty. I probably don't have to have it on my podcast, but this is the relationship that I'm building with you guys, I hope. So I think you're allowed to hold boundaries, even in death. I'm definitely protecting my nervous system as best as I can, even though I've driven all the way back to Hertfordshire and endured quite an emotional 4 days or so. It's been tricky. And one of the things I've really learned is that, especially when dealing with other people, because it turned out he was kind to others, especially neighbours, is I can be truthful and honour my truth without being cruel. There's no need to endlessly talk about the things that he did. There isn't. And some people aren't in the place where they can hear that, and I would like to respect that, whilst also respecting myself. What do I want to end this with? I suppose I want to end this with saying that I'm so grateful to the people that follow me. Why do I do all this? I do this because I am experiencing these unique and profound emotions, and I am an emotional vessel in the sense that I will tell the truth about how I feel, because I know that it's likely that you feel like that. And we live in a world where everybody tries to decorate and dress up and blend their state, their emotional hopes and promises and dreams and delusions at times into an algorithm. And that can sometimes mean that what they say isn't honest, or is a version of honesty that they're willing to give away. But I want to give it all to you for the purpose of making sure that you understand that life's going to throw these crazy situations at us. And that it's always, at least with ourselves, imperative that we remain honest and true to our own emotions and how we feel. Kind of a lead by example kind of situation. Like I said, I'm not looking for sympathy. I don't know if it warrants that, if I'm honest. But what's also important about grief is that if your grief doesn't look like everybody else's, that there's nothing wrong with you. It's important. You're not cold. You're not broken. You're not even ungrateful. You're responding honestly to your lived experience. Conflicting emotions don't cancel each other out. Love, anger, grief, and relief can all coexist at the same time. They can. And they will, whether you do anything or don't. And lastly, I think I want to say that grief doesn't ask for permission, so neither should your truth. So if you're going through anything similar to what I'm going through, a loss of any kind, because that's what grief is, it's loss, then stay true to yourself, be emotionally honest with yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself. Sorry this was so solemn, but I'm sad, I suppose. So thank you so much for listening today, and I will see you next week for a much more upbeat Johnny Lawrence podcast. Thank you.